It was born from a lot of different things, and I think you got that right. I definitely came from like a house of science. My mom worked for big tech companies, Dell Computers. My dad was a math teacher turned computer scientist, and so math was like science was always kind of like a part of my upbringing, which is where it's sort of like the Bill Nye the Science Guy stuff comes in. That was like I would actually get home from school and watch Bill Nye the Science Guy. I think I was like the only person who watched it outside of school. But I mean, that's sort of like the sci-fi sprinkle of the story. But really, when it comes down to it, it's this story about a husband and wife, and this couple throughout their entire lives, sort of told in a pretty unique way structurally. We can't give away too much, but it's sort of one of those. Yeah, it's much more. It's much more than you think is going on as you're watching. I'll just say that. So.
Well, I think the most important thing was to play the moment. And even though we had read the script and knew where it was going, it was to play the authentic reality of that moment within this story and within the relationship, playing the relationship at that moment. And so that was, I mean, it was so fun also because working with Ray and Colin, it was like the enthusiasm that I had for this project was kind of shared by everyone. So it was one of those things where it was a lot of like, what about this? What about this? And there was no and when you watch the movie, there's no end to some of these discussions. So that was really exciting because it was every day we'd work on it and we'd kind of discover a different piece and a different layer. And so, but it was so your strategy for playing it was to just play the reality of that moment.
Well, a lot of the things that Jim talked about and that Colin talked about are what appealed to me is I do love the magical realism element, and I agree with Jim that we had similar approaches as actors that you have to start with just do each snapshot at a time, and because those moments and how Colin wrote it is those memories are very real to the person who's remembering it or telling it or living it, then philosophically and artistically, the three of us would have conversations about how the jigsaw puzzle pieces fit together, which was really stimulating conversation and really interesting. But then when you're performing it, you had to have an eye to what the cog in the wheel is, the scene, so that you could understand the tone that you're playing it with. But Jim's right. Then you had to just like let go and play the relationship. And as far as playing Erin, I liked that she was never two-dimensional. She was written three-dimensional, and Colin wanted nothing more than to push that, to make her more and more textured. You were going to speak to
No,
that?
well, yeah, kind of in a way. I mean, I think that like one of the big goals was like we'd often tell because the story is sort of like told in this kind of unique way, and we kept talking about how it's not really set in a time, but it's set in a tone.
Right.
And I think like it came down like every decision that we were making came down to like, well, what's the emotion here? We just sort of like it's not really that kind of like a typical thread of plot, like it kind of bounces around in this way that I think was really kind of like an adventure, like a discovery process for everyone. We were like, oh, but this relates to that. I mean, I was discovering shit and I wrote it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.